So this part of the Dark Chester tour brings us to the Groves, and this takes us into the heart of Georgian Chester, really. The Groves, founded as the riverside promenade along the banks of the River Dee in the 1730s, and they were a beautiful place to come and stroll and take the air and walk with your family. And to this day, there's still a kind of a place for families to gather in Chester. But like a lot of Chester's history, they've got a really dark heart that beats within them as well, because this riverside walkway was also the route of the cart. And when I talk about the cart, I'm talking about the cart that would have brought the condemned men from the Northgate jail. We're talking about top end of town, past Story House, near where the Porter restaurant, the tapas bar, is today on the city walls. It's the old Northgate jail. And the Northgate jail was famous for its torture chamber, the delightfully named Little Ease. Now imagine Little Ease was as a stone room, and you would be inside and they would be inserting long wooden posts. So you get squeezed further and further and further and further, tighter and tighter and tighter, until you confess. And then once they've got the confession, they will throw you on the back of the cart and they will trundle you down through the streets of Chester along this way, heading out along the river to the modern day suburb of Bourton and to Gallows Hill. In 1801, there was a man called John Clare, and he found himself in that exact position. He found himself on the cart, trundling along this way, and he knew that's a one-way ticket. He knows there's no coming back from this scenario, and so he decides to do something about it. Now you have to bear in mind that in those days there would have been huge crowds of people gathered here because it was the big Saturday night out in Chester. There were no Chester races, there was no 1980s nostalgia disco boats on the River Dee. If you wanted your big family night out in Chester in 1801, you would come down here with the family, you would bring your basket of rotten eggs and rotten tomatoes, and as the cart trundles past, you'd be there chucking the eggs, chucking the tomatoes, shouting, jeering. It's like a little bit of pantomime, I guess, really, a bit of theatrics. The people of Chester, Cestrians is the name for the people of Chester, C-E-S-T-R-I-A-N-S. The Cestrians loved a good public execution. They could not get enough of them. They thought it was the best night ever. They thought it was better than the Love Island final. They just wanted to see the executions. And they would come out en masse. They would gather right here where we're looking right now in order to see the cart trundling past and to go and see the public execution. John Clare had always pleaded his innocence. He'd always said that he hadn't done it. And bear in mind as well, he was condemned to death for not for what we would consider a major crime. He was condemned to death for stealing bread. It was as simple as that. But he gets to about this point on his journey, and he decides this is his moment, this is the chance. If he's going to do something about it, this is the time to do it. And so he gets himself off the cart, and he gets himself into the water. So imagine, you know, if you look around us now, the bandstand where we are today, the suspension bridge around us, these are the Victorian additions to Chester. They're not here in this time. It's a more simple layout. It's more wooded on the other side as well. You haven't got the University of Chester's Business School, the Churchill House, which is an old World War II secret underground bunker building. None of that's there. John Clare gets himself off the cart and he gets himself into the water and he starts swimming for it. Now, imagine the crowd at this point. They are going mental. They think this is the best night ever. But what happens next changes Chester's history. He's swimming away. He's giving it a really good go, and he's about halfway across. And the crowd are shouting and cheering. They think this is amazing. But slowly, in front of a huge crowd of people, they watch in horror as Clare gets dragged down underneath the water. They listen to the sound of his lungs filling with the water, and next thing they know, the dead corpse of John Clare is floating on the gentle ripples of the River Dee where the ducks are now swimming. What happened to Clare? One simple answer: leg irons. He hadn't counted for the fact that the leg irons would drag him down. Now that's bad enough, and John Clare met a grisly fate on that day in 1801. But it's the next bit that propels him into the annals of Chester folklore, because you have to bear in mind that in those days the hangman was getting paid not by the number of dead bodies at the end of his shift, but by the number of people he put to the noose. And he didn't want to miss out on his payment. He wants his money at the end of the day. And so in front of a huge crowd of people gathered here in Chester, he wades into the water of the River Dee, drags the lifeless corpse of John Clare from the water, slings it on the back of his cart, drives it all the way down there towards the modern-day suburb of Broughton, and at Gallows Hill, overlooking the meadows, proceeds to hang the dead man from the gallows. That makes John Clare famous in Chester history. It means that he was the last public execution in the city. The people of Chester at that point said, no more. This is like a line in the sand. We don't want to be party to this anymore. We don't want to see this anymore. And John Clare was the last one to be executed in public. Doesn't mean they stopped killing people in Chester. Far from it. Executions continued well into the reign of Queen Victoria. The last woman executed in Chester in the 1860s, the last man in the 1880s. But they did them behind closed doors. At that point, they decided to take them inside. They did them at the Northgate jail until its closure, and then they took them across to Chester Castle, the old Norman Motte and Bailey Castle overlooking the Welsh Hills on the other side of town. But John Clare has a special place in Chester's history as the last man to suffer that particularly gruesome fate. If you've enjoyed this kind of story and would like to hear more, then you can join a Dark Chester tour, and you can find out more information as well if you follow me on Instagram, Dark Chester Tour, all one word, all lowercase. Tickets available at the Visitor Information Centre in Town Hall Square.